It is all going to dust. Part 5. A meditation on Armageddon, double standards, dying hegemonies, and the world we are building from their ashes. Everyone's waiting for the end, and someone is happy to help. There is one dimension of the Middle East catastrophe that Western secular rationalism is peculiarly ill-equipped to process, because acknowledging it would require taking seriously ideas it has spent 2 centuries condescending to. So let us take them seriously. All 3 Abrahamic faiths, the 3 religions that between them account for the beliefs of over 4 billion people, have elaborate, internally coherent, and vigorously contested eschatologies centered on the same patch of land: Jerusalem, the Levant, the territory that encompasses modern Israel, Palestine, and the surrounding region. They do not merely disagree about this land's political future. They believe its fate is cosmically predetermined, that its destiny will trigger the end of history itself. In Christian eschatology, specifically the premillennial dispensationalism that is, according to Trinity College Dublin's Carlo Aldrovandi, by far the most influential apocalyptic belief system in contemporary America, the sequence is specific. The Jewish people must return to the Holy Land. The temple must be rebuilt in Jerusalem. Then comes the rapture, the Great Tribulation, the Battle of Armageddon, the second coming of Christ, and a 1,000-year reign. This is not a fringe theology. Its primary political expression, Christian Zionism, counts over 30 million Americans as adherents. Its largest organization, Christians United for Israel, has 10 million members and direct access to Republican politicians at the highest levels. Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, and Paula White-Cain, all senior figures in Trump's first administrations, are documented believers in rapture theology. His current ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, is also a Zionist, who recently stated that the state of Israel has the divine right over most of the Middle East. Pastor John Hagee personally lobbied Donald Trump to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Quote, "The countdown to Armageddon has begun," Hagee's fellow pastor Robert Jeffers declared when Israel launched its 2021 offensive on Gaza. This is not metaphor. It is policy intention, dressed as prophecy. The critical thing to understand about Christian Zionist eschatology, and this is where the rationalists' jaw should drop and remain dropped, is that it requires the expulsion of Palestinians from the land, the demolition of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the rebuilding of the temple, not as side effects, as prerequisites, as necessary steps on the divine schedule. In other words, for this theology to be satisfied, what is happening in Gaza is not a tragedy. It is progress. It is, in the most literal sense of the phrase, God's will. Now consider Islam. Islamic eschatology, recorded across the Hadith collections and believed to be accurate by most Orthodox Sunnis, places the final battle, Al-Malama al-Kubra, the Great Massacre, in the Levant as well. The Mahdi will appear. Isa, Jesus, will descend near Damascus. The Dajjal, the Antichrist, will be defeated. A 2012 Pew Research Center poll found that at least half of Muslims in 9 Muslim-majority countries believed the Mahdi's arrival was imminent within their own lifetime. Then consider Judaism, which, while it does not use the word Armageddon, contains the war of Gog and Magog, a final conflict involving Israel and its enemies, and among the religious Zionist movement, a mainstream conviction that the founding of the State of Israel in 1948 was the beginning of the Messianic redemption. The scholar Robert Leonhard, writing for Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, noted that Jerusalem is the epicenter of eschatology, the focal point of the apocalyptic scenarios of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All 3 faiths gave rise to prophecies that the end of human history will occur there. Notice what this means. From a rational standpoint, 3 of the world's major religions share a geography for the apocalypse, hold mutually exclusive and irreconcilable versions of how it unfolds, each involving the other's defeat or conversion, and portions of all 3 have active, well-funded, politically connected movements working to bring it about as quickly as possible. The Islamic eschatological tradition sees the Jewish leader who rebuilds the temple as the Dajjal, the Antichrist. The Christian Zionist tradition sees the same figure as the herald of Christ's return. These are not compatible narratives with a diplomatic solution. They are mutually annihilatory cosmologies being acted out in real time, with real weapons, on a real population. From the perspective of secular rationalism, the philosophical tradition that produced the Enlightenment, the Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the institutions of international law, the obscenity of this situation is almost beyond description. We have built a global order ostensibly premised on reason, evidence, and human dignity, and then we have handed its most consequential foreign policy decisions to people who believe that the destruction of a civilian population is a divinely scheduled prerequisite for the return of a Messiah. As former evangelical preacher Frank Schaeffer said in the documentary Praying for Armageddon, quote, "The bedrock of support for the state of Israel is there because American evangelicals think it will bring Jesus back quicker," unquote. Without their vote, he noted, no Republican gets elected anywhere in America. Retired U.S. Army Colonel Larry Wilkerson, former advisor to General Colin Powell, put the strategic implication plainly, quote, "The most vivid danger in all of this, I think, is the special relationship with Israel. They are looking for the U.S. relationship with Israel, ultimately to bring about Armageddon and the rapture and Christ's 1,000-year reign," unquote. He said this as a security concern, as a warning about the contamination of military planning by theological imperative. The warning was not heeded. We are, in the most literal available sense, watching people try to start the end of the world, and the girls of Minav's primary school, who wanted, I assume, to grow up, to learn, to live, are among the collateral damage of someone else's divine itinerary. If there is a more complete definition of obscenity, this writer has not encountered it. American hegemony is ending. This is not a polemical assertion. It is the measured view of a growing body of international relations scholars, former military commanders, and, most tellingly, of American strategic documents themselves, which describe a, quote, multipolar world, unquote, with the barely concealed panic of a man who has just been told his monopoly is over. What we are witnessing across the Middle East, the sustained project to reshape, control, and if necessary destroy any state that does not align with Washington's preferred order, is not the behavior of a confident hegemon. It is the behavior of one in its last throes, the frantic energy of an empire that knows at some level it cannot articulate publicly that the window is closing. And in these last throes, ideas that were once confined to classified think tank papers have crept into mainstream discourse with astonishing speed. The notion of limited nuclear strikes as a strategic tool, tactical nuclear weapons, low-yield warheads, usable nuclear options, has been genuinely entertained in Western strategic circles, particularly regarding Iran. Let us pause here and appreciate the magnificent intellectual bankruptcy of this idea. A limited nuclear strike, in the judgment of essentially every serious physicist, strategist, and climate scientist who has modeled the scenarios, triggers one of several catastrophic escalation chains: regional nuclear exchange, nuclear winter, or the permanent shattering of the non-proliferation framework that has kept the weapon theoretical for 80 years. There is no such thing as a contained nuclear moment. The atom does not do limited. Fallout does not respect borders, and the geopolitical fallout, the message sent to every nation without nuclear weapons that their sovereignty is perpetually provisional, would trigger a global proliferation cascade that makes the current moment look like a minor disagreement. But then, strategic clarity has never been the empire's strongest suit in its last throes. Dick Cheney once called the Iraq insurgency its last throes. That was in 2005. The war continued for another decade and a half. Empires are apparently remarkably slow last throwers. What comes next is not comfort. Whoever inherits the next iteration of global order, whether for a Chinese century, a multipolar chaos, or some configuration not yet legible, will inherit scored Earth, literal and metaphorical. The ecological devastation, the fractured institutions, the 300 million people displaced by climate change by 2050, the global south stripped of its resources and left with its dead, these are the ashes. The question is whether the heir has the imagination and the asabiya to build something from them, or whether they simply repeat the cycle. Even Khaldun, observing from his 14th century vantage point, would advise the inheritors: remember why you rose. Do not become what you replaced. The moment you mistake power for virtue, the clock starts again. Messiahs do come, but they never descend from the skies. Sometimes they come with a declaration of human rights in the form of Cyrus, his armies, and sometimes they come with a message of peace and forgiveness and humility, as once a Jewish prophet in Palestine did.